Hello, welcome back everyone. This is Peter Ingle and Mihai Algiu, and this will be another episode from the ongoing playlist of Reigniting the Fragments of the Fourth Way, where we are exploring core important ideas of this methodology or this philosophy, spiritual teaching meant towards helping us discover the truth of what we really are, free ourselves from illusions and suffering, unnecessary suffering, and help us use unavoidable natural suffering to deepen our awakening and freeing ourselves from all of these snags of the tricky illusion, and get to know the truth of reality. So, as you'll see here below is the playlist with many episodes, and now we are just going to have we are going to answer some questions from people, some of the people from people we work with, or just people who are watching these videos and are inspired and they had questions. So welcome, Peter.
Thank you.
So can you, first question from Austin, can you discuss more in detail about economizing one's energy, identification or leaks? Identification or, yeah, sorry, I have some misspelling here. So, as we know it, in order for one to work on ourselves, to work consciously, we need energy. If we are leaking all the time, then we have nothing to invest into the work, meaning we will make no progress. The energy we use to work does this in some way. The energy we use for work, does this in some way get reciprocated in us? Meaning, do we gain energy whenever we work on ourselves, we work consciously on ourselves? Let us imagine going for a walk. This requires energy. Yet, if we do this consciously, it is not only possible to preserve our energy, but also gain some energy in the process. This is an ongoing investigation for me. I would like to hear your guys' input on this topic. And before we go into it, maybe, this is based on this idea that in the fourth way, the 6 obstacles, daydreaming, imagination, identification, the expression, reactive expression of unpleasant emotions, this inner considering, identification with what other people think about us and being wrapped up in appearing in a certain way, lying, and unnecessary talk. These are considered areas of leaking energy. So we are receiving energy through sleep, and how the Creator made this body mind through sleep and food and water and air and impressions. And however we leak this energy in these unconscious manifestations, and therefore, we are drained, we are miserable, we are unhappy, we are in a sense of being separate, and there is no energy. Somehow the idea is that if we want to follow the fourth way path, we need to somehow improve this like a refinery. The body mind is like a sophisticated refinery, and currently the refinery is leaking, is blowing its own material left and right, explosions and this or that, and we are tired. And so the production that is designed to, with conscious work, with self-remembering and transformation of suffering, the production of this refinery will be to help us transcend the state of sleep and become self-aware, and then even going further. So, but we will never achieve that. We'll never go there if we are leaking left and right. So that's the context, and the question was about this, about economizing energy, and if the work, conscious work, gives energy. And any thoughts on this, Peter?
I was looking at the questions here. I have a copy in front of me on my screen, and to a large extent, I feel the answer to these questions are in the questions. And Austin seems already to understand about leaking energy. But the two statements that caught my attention are: one, do we gain energy whenever we work consciously? And the simple answer is yes. And we have to understand what that means, because in the fourth way teachers, we have these four centers, and each center has a moving part, an emotional part, and an intellectual part, and they work with different levels of attention. And so when we work consciously, can mean two things. It can mean consciousness itself, meaning trying to be present whenever we're doing anything. And this immediately creates an alignment of our centers and of our energy. And so, yes, we do gain energy when we work consciously. But another side of this is when we simply engage what the fourth way calls the intellectual parts of centers. And now we're focusing our attention. And so when attention is controlled, energy is automatically conserved and spent correctly, and it will increase energy. Do you know, if you're tired and you're sitting on the couch and you don't feel so good, or you don't feel so good, you just feel kind of lazy. If you just sit there and do nothing, you'll continue to feel kind of lethargic. But if you get up, if you clean your room, or you go for a walk, or you do some exercise or something, you will actually create energy for yourself. But sometimes we have to do this by engaging. We have to do it on purpose, intentionally, with focused attention. And another way to say it is we have to make ourselves do it. We have to overcome resistance. And this overcoming resistance in ourselves creates energy. And it's a useful energy if we're not identified. But to be present now, it's a different quality of energy that gets produced in us. And so, but this comes through experience and knowing, finding for oneself. Do you have more energy? Do you create more energy of a certain kind when you're more present, when you're more conscious, as you do things, anything and everything? If you do it with more conscious awareness and more controlled attention, see what happens. Pardon me. And the other thing that caught my attention in his question was, is it not only possible to preserve our energy, but also gain energy? This is interesting. Preserve energy and gain. So not only are we trying not to lose energy through identification, imagination, inner considering, expressing negative emotions, lying, talking, all those things the fourth way points out. Do we gain some energy in the process? This goes back to what I just said a moment ago. When we resist these mechanical outflows of energy that happen by themselves, they happen through the moving parts of centers and through the emotional parts of centers largely. We hurry, we talk too fast, we react overmuch when things happen with our emotions and our negativity. We get too identified, too invested, too insistent, or too resistant. And all of that, we lose energy. So when we withhold those manifestations, that energy that was going out through the moving and emotional parts of centers is now being contained by the intellectual parts of centers. And now it can be processed differently in us. This can get very technical talking about this, but it's true. We're a factory, we're a human machine, and we very much depend on energy. And but we can transform this energy. And I'm hesitating because it's not enough just to be kind of attentive and to have self-control and use our energy in a controlled way. That's not what this is about. We're talking about harnessing the energy. It's sort of like if you had 6 horses and they all had a rope tied to a wagon, but they weren't working in unison, and they all just started sort of trotting away with the cart. That's different than if they're all harnessed together. And now it becomes a unified effort and a unified energy. It's more concentrated. There's more control, but it's not control for its own sake. So all of these things we're doing, we are really conserving our energy so that we can funnel the energy as much as possible into greater consciousness, greater awareness in the moment as we live our life.
Well, what else comes up for me? Like practically, like I was noticing, was a little tense. My back was tense, and I know video and trying to do a good job presenting this idea. And so several times in listening to you, I became aware of unnecessary tensions in my back, and somehow releasing them. And so this idea of Gurdjieff talks about unnecessary tensions, unnecessary. So all of this, they eat our reserves. Yeah, so this is very practical work to cultivate this when we sit, listening to someone or all this, to just let the body be as passive as possible, alert, sensitive, aware. Let the body die in a way that it's not necessary, just like in the science fiction movies when the robot is not doing anything, it's like so that's a great practical way of conserving energy. This thing with the cell phones, I mean, I really see like there needs to be vigilance and aim, intentionality and wisdom, because they are designed that we go from one thing to another, and then you're really tired, and it's like there's no energy for something important. There's no energy. I feel it in myself, and that's very important. They didn't have cell phones at that time. And the final piece was, yeah, I really resonate with that. We are not, I don't fully resonate with this. It's not just about economizing energy and then something good is going to happen, and that's kind of utilitarian way. Here we are talking about wakefulness, more awakening, which comes with a sense of, I mean, the control, the tension and effort and intentionality, and all of this creates a more, from the outside, may seem more controlled person, less flailing. But the idea here is to transcend our consciousness, to transcend phenomena, to transcend and not stick to everything. And so this capacity for all of this plugging the leaks, as Gurdjieff would say, something accumulates in you, and then at some point we'll get the sense of this, what the real I is, the real I, and then we have a taste of one's own presence, but that doesn't seem to be the end of the road at all. And then we will still have difficult emotions, suffering, friction, things like that from the past, patterns, generational things. So we need to have enough grit and staying power to not stick to difficult stuff, to transcend every arising phenomena.
Something this relates to also, and it goes back to the essence of what is behind this paragraph with these questions in it. And that is, when we are not conscious, or when we are less conscious, which means when awareness is not cognizant as itself, as this source from which we are aware, what's happening is all of its energy is going out. And really, these obstacles the fourth way points to are different forms in which the energy goes out. It's the form in which awareness actually gets transformed into mechanical energy in the form of a human being, psychologically and physically. So we are identified. We're now invested in things. We're over invested. We're too passionate. We're too hurried, too harried. Our energy is going out from awareness through our response and, and our behavior, our attachment. Same thing when we consider worrying about what other people think. The same thing when we lie, when we just talk on our phone. When we're looking at the phone, our energy is usually going out. We want stimulus, but it's going out to get it. So when we walk down the street and we look, our energy goes out, out, out. And so when we're more conscious, or when consciousness is more aware, closer to its source, the source of itself, energy is coming in. We become much more absorbing. You can sit on a park bench and just look at the world around you. And if consciousness is more present, more cognizant, everything that is seen will come into consciousness. It will come into the field of consciousness, and it will, in effect, nourish consciousness. Consciousness will become more fueled, more fed by virtue of absorbing. So when we're more awake, we're more absorbing of everything. And we're less pushing it out, pushing it away, deflecting it, or chasing after it. And this in general is just a way to think about it. Think how often we're always on to the next thing. We're busy, we're running, we walk across the room, we're already thinking about what we're going to do when we get across the room. We're in this constant state of anticipation of the future. Or of course, we're just in imagination about the past, but we're not absorbing right here, right now, what is here, what's going on right here. And even as simple as listening to someone else talk, to not go out and not be imposing the next thought on them, but just letting it come in, letting their thought come in. So in general, how do we conserve energy? By not letting it just go out all the time, unwittingly, unconsciously. And then how do we create energy? By consciously absorbing really the whole experience of living and seeing the world around us. And that includes our internal world. We can just watch our internal world the same way we're sitting on the park bench, looking at the trees and the squirrels and the people and the cars. We can sit in the internal world on the park bench, as it were, and watch what's passing by in this internal world in the form of emotions, thoughts, tiredness, energy, like, dislike, a tendency to judge, attractions, all these things. We can watch them. This part of us, this awareness, can stay home and watch. But it's not watching for the sake of watching. It's absorbing. We have within us this incredible capacity to absorb the experience of life, but mostly we miss it because we're going out. The energy is going the wrong way. All this energy can go back to this source.
Yeah, this reminds me that in the workbooks, and actually we recommend people to check in the workbooks. And what I mean by workbooks, Fourth Way books, Uspensky, Rodney Collin, Gurdjieff, Gene the Salesman, I would say Peter's books, Peter Ingle's books. Yeah, about the food diagram and the human factory and things like that. But Gurdjieff I just read this quote recently, was saying this thing, like as one is conscious of being, conscious of one's own presence, and then I'm looking at the tree, or I'm looking, I have a tree outside the window here, or I'm looking at Peter, there's the impression of Peter that has certain amounts of units of energy. So there's Peter, but if I'm also remaining aware of myself as I'm aware of Peter, then this impression doubles. So it's double. So we are acquiring more, and some way will be like creating one's conscious, I don't want to say soul, but yeah.
Well, this relates to the fourth way idea of the three types of food, air, and impressions, that we need food, solid food, and we need air, just as we need water. And then this whole idea of impressions is related to the concept of self-remembering consciousness, what we were talking about a moment ago, absorbing impressions, visual and audio and other impressions, and in such a way that they come in, instead of us going out to get them, just to let them come in and be absorbed consciously, be absorbed at the source of awareness, rather than at the far end of awareness, where it sent itself. Awareness sends itself on an errand in the form of attention, but that attention is then loses recognition of its source, and now we're just focused on something. And that's good. That's often people that don't even see what's in front of them, but to start to notice is one thing, but then to have all of it come back to that which is noticing it. This is self-remembering. This is what the fourth way means by that. And this is a more conscious experience of seeing, of what we call taking in impressions, letting impressions come in.
Yeah. And one final thought from me is that doesn't mean that now we are going to be energized and it's going to be full of energy and I'm just full of energy all the time and feeling good. No. We can do this work and feel atrocious pain and sorrow and fear and shame and guilt, and feel the pain of others, and sometimes we'll just lie down, we're on the floor, but if we allow it, we don't resist it, we allow it and try to also remember ourselves at the same time, we do gain energy. It won't show us we are energized, as we gain energy, meaning more awakefulness. It's not going to be groovy all the time. No, the feeling groovy all the time, that comes much, much later, and I'm not sure if it's all the time.
Yes, we're really talking about transforming energy, not just saving energy, not just not leaking it, and not just using it and accumulating it, but transforming it. What that means is distilling it. Out of any energy we receive, just like when our body eats food, it digests and distills. There's a finer energy inside the energy we get when we eat, and that gets distilled. And the same thing even with air. We breathe in this oxygen, but it's getting distilled by the lungs, and something's passing to the bloodstream. There's a distillation that happens. A finer energy is distilled from a less fine or a coarser energy. And the same with visual impressions and the experiences of our life. We're talking now about transforming them via consciousness, which is the great distiller. And it distills this energy and extracts the fine energy really of itself. And then pulling it back into itself. It's hard. We don't have the proper words, because you can't describe this in words, really. We're talking about it in a way that the mind can try to grasp it. But really, this fine energy we're distilling. Even when you look at a beautiful flower and you think you're seeing a beautiful flower, and you are, but the fact that you can be aware of the flower and know that you're seeing it, and what comes let's say what comes back to awareness, into awareness, is not the flower. And oddly enough, it's not even the appearance of the beautiful flower. There's a even finer energy that is distilled and transformed. And really, that's the big, simple answer to Austin's question. In the end, that's what it's about.
Yeah, this idea of using, I mean, any object, any perception, could be an emotion or external perception. Use it to follow up its source, track its source, write that back to its source. That's connected to the question here. So even in emotion, yeah, we allow it. We don't try to avoid it. We allow it. If it's sorrow, can be all kind of stuff. But let this be a vehicle at some point to take us back to the source of this emotion, where's this aware openness.
Even when we look at another person, I was mentioning looking at a flower, but often we look at another person and all we see is the surface of this other person. And yet, if we really look at someone, there are depths, unseen depths in each of us that go unnoticed by others. And you look and you see, I'm looking at Mihai right now on the screen. I'm not even seeing him in person, but behind that face and beard and skull and tone of voice, and there's a being in there. This is just the outer coating. And inside, there's so much happening psychologically, physiologically, emotionally, and then, of course, the consciousness. And there's so much going on. And our awareness, the awareness in us, can begin to perceive this and distill it. And then for one human being to gaze, for the awareness to gaze through the eyes of one human being upon another human being, it is a profound thing. But usually we just take it for granted. Oh, there's Mihai. There's so much, and this is one person looking at one person. And this is just one aspect of life on earth. Mm-hmm. We can become so much more aware, attuned to all these things, but for that, we have to disappear, really. We have to, yes, the feeling of ourselves as this person has to be left behind. And it's so beautiful. Just go for a walk and look at everything as though you don't exist. You do not exist as a person. Just look at the world without you in it. So much of the time we're in the way. And that's where our energy goes and gets lost.
Yeah, Jean Klein was saying, in your absence, there's your presence. The absence of the small me, there's the presence. And anyway, when you say what you said to me, it really, I was noticing, it touched me. I had tears and touching my heart to be seen like that. And this is what we really want. We get these relationships and try to squeeze something out of it, but we are not open, we are not receptive, we don't see that. And actually that is the experience of love. So, and then you cry. All right, well, let's move on to another question, and this one is from Mike. There are several questions. They're all connected to the non-expression of unpleasant emotions and negative emotions. And my new favorite work idea is viewing negative emotions as material, raw material. This concept has been handy in the seeing, stopping, and struggling with the non-expression. but I want to make sure I'm getting it right. I understand material to mean that our negative emotions are a matter to be used, that through the expression of negative emotions, this material flows out of us. Once flowing, the material becomes out of our control and we lose the opportunity to work with it, losing consciousness in the process. So my questions are, number one, is this understanding correct? Number two, shall we go one by one, or is my understanding correct? Yes,
In
it is.
general, yes.
Yes, it is correct. That is actually why we are this non-expression people can have a lot of objections about it because they are afraid that, well, but why? Then I may get repressed, or maybe I'm going to be a doormat, or it's going to be unhealthy, or various reasons why people have objections around this thing. And especially these days, there's this like to flow, to be authentic, to just be yourself, so which is all higher ideas that have been distorted, and it's like what's called be influence. So yeah, they are material. They are material, and then if they're expressed, if expressed out of a reactive identification, we don't have a choice. That's the thing. When we are more asleep, then this happens so fast, and then we don't have a choice, so to say, because our lack of wakefulness and our wrong attitudes meaning, no, I need to express this is important, I need to let them show this, I want to punish them or whatever. So due to this low level of awareness and low understanding and attitudes that are supporting the reactivity, then this energy, the hydrogen, the energy of the negative emotion is leaked, is blown. This is what we talked the previous question. The refinery has a big blowout, and that may feel satisfying. But then, you see, the production stops. Then they don't even know what made me negative, what was behind it, what happened, what button was activated. So basically the material is lost, we leaked it, identification happened, and we lost opportunity in the moment to investigate what this is about. We lost opportunity in the moment to transmute it. One can still do some investigation post-mortem to understand what was that about, but still the explosion happened. I mean, autopsy, afterwards, after a day, bring up the person up and kind of can feel what happened and what was the button that was pressed and all of that. Any thoughts on this, Peter?
It's such a rich topic. There's a lot in these questions that he's asking, and they're very good questions. Why is this important? Why does the fourth way lend so much importance to this area? Negative emotions, the study of negative emotions, the work to not express negative emotions, and where that's supposed to lead in terms of possibly the transformation of negative emotions. This is big. It lies right at the heart of everything the fourth way is about. One way to see this is that when a negative emotion takes form in us and either flares out of us or causes some kind of subterfuge internally in a concentrated way, in both those instances, a very, very fine material, and this goes back to our original question a moment ago about energy, a very, very fine material of awareness passes out of itself rapidly and starts to take psychological and then physical form. And it critically, and here's why we're interested in it in large part, it forms itself into this very deep felt feeling of I. And this feeling of I actually stems from awareness. but it is awareness that is calcified in psychological and then physical form. And when we express it, when it goes out and we spit it out, we spew it out, it is gone. That energy is now gone. If we can contain it, internally in a psychological world, now there's a possibility of bringing it back, extracting it back to that fine energy from which it started. So, and Mike even asked in his question about the seeds of consciousness. Well, the seeds of consciousness inherent in this energy. It's a very interesting question, because the answer is yes, understood properly, yes. That energy came from consciousness, from awareness, but got rapidly transformed in mechanical form that took a psychological and then a physical sense of I, me, I'm this person, I'm identified, I'm angry, I feel sorry for myself, I'm a victim, or I'm going to make this happen no matter what, no matter who stands in my way, I'm going to defend myself, etc., etc., etc. Yes, all this feeling of I, me. And the transformation of negative emotions is not about changing these emotions into something else, so that we were once angry and now we're, passive. We're just a sweet, kind person. No, it means that the energy that went into all of that manifestation is being distilled. Finer, 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 finer. And that's what it means in terms of the seeds of consciousness. There's so much more. There's so much we could spend the whole. We've already done many videos on this topic, but yes.
And Peter wrote a book on the subject. So, yeah, there's something very important. There was a misunderstanding in my work. What you said here, it's basically when all of this mechanical operation is happening, this identification and leaking out, and in capacity, in ability to be with this unpleasant energy, intensity, and then that happens, goes out. In some people, they are more subtle. I know I'm working with people in my group, they notice that the way they express is that they are kind of going to their friends and they are funny, like, you know what, you won't believe what just happened, and they are saying, basically complaining, gossiping, can be in a very theatrical way, venting, it can happen in very subtle ways, or it can play out in the head, taking them to the court inside and rehashing the situation. But what's all of this unconscious manifestations, they create this, which is already in place, this false, illusory, separate me, the separate self, as they talk in non-duality. And by expressing, we also reinforce the habit. We reinforce the habit of consciousness to be locked into the setting of a separate me. And this separate me, this I, that is the source of all suffering on this planet, in our life, this me separate thing.
The other thing inherent in this is identification. None of this can happen without identification. And this is a big habit in us. And this goes back to Mihai, what you were saying earlier about the objections to this idea that people have sometimes, the many objections. And they're based on this idea that we need to be identified. And when something happens, we need to get identified. We need to respond and react with some form of identification, fight back, flare back, run away, hide. There has to be some kind of engagement on our part from a psychological and a conscious point of view. We have to invest our identity in response to something. And when it's negatively charged, it takes this particular form, the fourth way calls negative emotions. But this is not true. We don't need to be identified. The gentleman who asked the question, What was it? One of the questions someone asked you, Mihai, was when my boss speaks badly of me, shouldn't I speak up? Shouldn't I say something? Or something? And yes, that's true, but you don't have to do it with identification. We don't have to fight back. We can still hold our ground. We can establish boundaries. We can express our point of view, and we can do it all without being identified. And we can do it all without becoming negative. And in fact, we will appear to be stronger than we imagine we do when we express negative. We see it as a sign of strength, as an expression of some kind of strength. I can really get angry. I can really blow up, or I can really lament and feel sorry for myself. I can really wallow in some good self-pity or melancholy. And yes, this is a big habit to break, because in order to break it, we have to develop a surety in ourselves. And it's not confidence, it's a surety of being that we need not be identified. And we need not use negativity as a defense mechanism.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess we'll go to that question later, but I want to read all these questions. Mike's question. So second one, if transforming this material fuels conscious awareness, is it accurate to say that the seeds of consciousness are contained within this material? If so, can a correlation be made between the use it or lose it nature of this material and sperm? Number 3, I'll just say them all. If this is true, does it mean that the material of negative emotions is finite in us, the way the sperm is? And if so, is there an urgency to use this material before it runs out? What does it even mean to run out of material? Is it helpful to think of a non-expression of negative emotion as a kind of a tantric practice? Yeah. Yes, I would say that it's helpful to think of a non-expression of negative emotion as a kind of tantric practice. However, I'm very concerned because the tantric practice has been misunderstood, distorted, and turned into some kind of sexual, kind of enhancing pleasure, enhancing orgasm kind of thing. And Tantra is the oldest spiritual teaching on earth that is known. And it's a very deep teaching, and very little is to do with sexuality. But yeah, there is the Tantra. And the Tantra is that this expression identification, we are in a self-contraction, they call it the self-contraction. Like consciousness is in the setting of separate me, small me. And that is a contraction, psychologically, emotionally, energetically, in every possible way. And it's painful and it's hurtful, and it's going to keep perpetuate this. So the tantric practice, its aim is to gradually open this so that consciousness is no longer in the setting of this. Yeah. Now, this doesn't mean that, doesn't mean with a non-expression that now we're going to be calm all the time, or at the time imperturbed all the time. From my experience, actually, the more we work with these teachings, I am becoming more sensitive, actually. I can feel people's feelings, and even it's like a small something, I'm touched by it. It's not that I have now some kind of armor and I am totally imperturbed. No, I'm touched by it, and still I'm transmuting that. I'm not just identifying with it. I'm allowing that to be while being the aware, open being. I'm not sure what to say about the thing with like, well, you run out of it. I mean, in the tantric, the Taoist teachings, that they say that yeah, the seed, the sperm, is a limited amount, depending on genes and whatever. And I'm not sure if I would say that the negative emotions are limited amount, because you see old people that keep churning in misery, and you know, like crabby, like
Also, one way to think about that, I mean, every day we have energy. To keep it simple, every day we wake up, we have a certain amount of energy, and it can be lost. It can be spent through negativity. It's one of the biggest leaks, expenditures. That's why the fourth way focuses on it so much. Psychologically and physically, then these negative emotions have a physiological component and a psychological component. And so this is why it's a kind of a longer study. It's not so simple. You can put your hand on the fire and it can burn, but that's not a negative emotion. That's an instinctive reaction, and that's healthy. But then when you blame the pot for doing something to you and you become negative, you kick it off the fire or something like that. That's when it's now a psychological phenomenon. But yes.
well, there might be a good sequel to this question that we keep alluding to. It's someone on YouTube, Dri 4664. That's the name. And so this person, I don't know this person, and I don't know the kind of work they are doing, but they've been watching a video that I put, which is about taking 2 weeks or for a whole month to about the video is called don't water the seeds of misery. And I was talking about this exercise in our group of non-expression of unpleasant emotions, but not stopping there necessarily, but investigating, transmuting the energy, de-identifying. But there's definitely this first step is to yeah. And so this person says this: I have a question for you. Aren't bad emotions, or bad, unpleasant, negative emotions, it's interesting, aren't bad emotions ways of showing us what needs to be changed? For example, if I put a lighter under my arm, I will feel these negative emotions telling me to move my hand. If I don't do it, I destroy my body. If my boss keeps on talking badly to me, shouldn't I respond at some point, making him understand that I don't accept this? What's the difference between the two examples? Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it bad emotions. I would say that's a negative or unpleasant emotions, because sometimes they can be so-called clean anger. It doesn't come from false personality, which is a signal that I do need to take some action. So that's not bad. This is my ally. This is on my dashboard, on my dashboard, sensing that I'm being taken advantage of, lied, tricked, abused. And it's natural to have this energy of no, in order to not be ensnared for years or into some kind of toxic relationship or some really bad situation. But anyway, you want to go into it, Peter? With the lighter, there's a difference.
Well, I think I touched on it earlier about the fire. That's an instinctive sensation, an instinctive reaction to healthy. And our instinctive center is by design negatively charged in this way. It's sensitive to danger. Something's not safe, something's too hot, something doesn't smell right. So then it's designed to do that. And that's what we call right work of centers in the fourth way system. But it's when we join in from the emotional side and we start to judge, condemn, dislike, hate, want revenge, as I say, then throw the lighter on the ground, become emotionally reactive. Instead of just perceiving what happened, we can perceive the instinctive center flinched and got burned. And we don't have to then go into a whole thing about it emotionally. That's where the negative emotion comes in. I wanted to say too, Mihai, that I just had another thought about the earlier question from Mike too that relates, and that is, do you know it's not that we have a certain amount of negative energy and we have to use it, because in the fourth way, the way the fourth way presents it is, it's possible to get to the point where you don't have many negative emotions because you're not identified. So in this sense, we don't need that energy. We can exhaust it by transforming it. And when that happens, what happens is internally you reach the point where things don't affect you in that way anymore, or less and less and less and less and less. And so now you have to find that energy elsewhere. And this is where the fourth way terms real suffering comes in. We are not able to transform the real suffering in our lives because we deflect it with negative emotions. And in many ways, this is preparation for being able to absorb the pressure of real suffering in our lives and not dodge it, not deflect it, not hide away from it, and not cloak our sense of identity in the negativity in response to real pressure. Most of our negativity we experience is in response to not heavy pressure, like the lighter burning your finger just briefly. That's not a serious life-changing event by any means. And we don't have to recoil and then flare up in this whole attitude of me in response to something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go with you now here. What we call here is real suffering, what in the fourth way call real suffering, as opposed to imaginary, self-created, unnecessary suffering. It is, for instance, you. I just talked to someone that anyway, their child is sick, really sick with cancer.
Mm.
Huh. That's real suffering. Uh, Loss of a loved one, dying, the loss of a loved one, physical pain. Um, all of this is real suffering. Betrayal somehow. Some close friends, they no longer want to talk to you, cut you off. There's some kind of part of the human experience of impermanence, as Buddha would say, old age, death, sickness, and loss.
Yes, in this sense, negative emotions are a stepping stone. It's another way to think of it. They're a stepping stone on the journey.
And if we can't we can't flex the muscle to step over that stone, the real suffering is much bigger boulder. So that's some kind of practice. To also this, to be able to be with this unpleasant energy, to this, to have a bigger house where this energy is housed, it's allowed. Yeah, we increase our capacity to feel consciously.
And in terms of negative emotions teaching us, showing us what we need to learn, you could go so far as to say it's that yes, they can teach us how much nonsense we have in us. In this whole area of becoming negative about things is in many ways immature and short-sighted. And it's when real suffering comes our way, it will knock the silliness out of us, knock
Yeah,
the nonsense. A lot of our negativity is nonsense, and it's just us taking things personally. And
yeah,
that's something we do need to learn.
yeah. It reminds me, I was talking, actually, I was interviewing a friend of mine, fellow psychotherapist, who had some serious cancer battles. And I think I made a video interviewing her called something Facing Death to Find Real Life or something like that. And I talked to her and she told me, like, as soon as she got this serious diagnosis, before her life, she was worried a lot about what people would think, and this, and frustration, and fear, and this, and that, and this, and that. And it said that when you got that, it's like all that was gone. And he was actually much happier life in some way, was very different. And when she had to deal with this. But coming back to this question, yeah. So first of all, the question from Dri, it's a difference in instinctive emotions, instinctive sensations, and emotional center, yeah. Emotional center emotions, and I'm not sure if this person is familiar with the fourth way or this or that. Yeah, the instinctive sensations, they have a jerky reactive element, and it's okay. It is designed to, we don't try now to control this, or of course if you practice martial arts and you learn certain special skills, then you learn to to optimize this response and all of that, be more efficient in facing adversity and danger. But that is no problem with that reactive unpleasant reaction that helps us to survive, take the body out of harm's way. However, it's not the same with the emotion center, because in sleep, in the second state, as they call in the fourth way, what is in charge is our false personality, which is a bunch of lies and conditioning and grandiosity and distortion. So there's kind of really false lies. And this false personality ongoingly generates these negative emotions, and they are almost all the time based on some distorted thinking and taking things personally and making assumptions, and they don't treat me right and not respected, and vanity, yeah, a lot of it. The thing with the boss, the thing with the boss, that somehow I could say it's a little bit different, because somehow being disrespected, being shouted at, I wouldn't, it doesn't feel right in my essence to tolerate that. And actually, yeah, it is somehow will be anger or hurt. And what I recommend, what I would do according to the fourth way work, is to feel that the pain or the anger or the hurt, and to be deeply present with it, and not right away lash out at the boss and all of that. So kind of do a little bit of being with it, transmuting it, and then, yeah, definitely, depending on the boss, depending on the situation, depending on your income, depending on many factors, but overall, if you're 3 kids at home, and then this is a well-paid job, and then there's a crisis, and it's a tough choice here. But I would say that, yeah, you can go after, you can either in the moment, if you have enough self-control and self-mastery, or later go to the boss, and actually it will be many more chances to be heard, and to your message to come in to the boss, if you are coming non-reactively. You're like, sir, I noticed that you are calling me a bitch, and you are calling me this or whatever, you are shouting at me, and this is not okay. This is not okay for this work environment, and this is not okay for me. I treat you with respect, and I expect the same in return. The less reactive one is, yet it's fine to have a little bit of edge, yeah? The more chances that will have an impact, and the more chances it will be heard. So it's not about not taking action. Sometimes there needs to be action taken, yeah. And something needs to be said, a boundary needs to be made.
Just a tangential thought that comes to me is the body by itself does not produce negative emotions. The body can hurt, the body can feel low, bad, pain, etc. But it's when the mind, our psychology, particularly our ego, this is how negative emotions are formed. And that's why this is so important for us. What does this have to do with the ego, this feeling of I? Do you know, animals, they don't have a psyche, an ego. They have kind of a sense of being, an essence. A dog has some people may say a personality, but it's not an ego. And animals can suffer a lot of abuse, for example, and you see wild animals too. they'll break a leg or hurt themselves or get a wound, and they'll endure for days or weeks or months or even years in a painful condition. They're not complaining. They're not seeking revenge. They're going about their existence. And this is the body, the instinctive and moving centers, as the fourth way says. But it's when our psychology gets tangled up in that, and we bring that to the mix, and now it becomes about the ego, it becomes about me. And this is where this negativity, it can be so revealing to study this and to see who in me, what in me is reacting so, who's taking it personally, needing to defend. Everything Mihai said was beautifully put too. I mean, we don't know the exact circumstances with this person and their boss, because a lot depends on the exact circumstances, what's really going on. Sometimes we are manifesting in such a way that we unwittingly attract a certain treatment from people, and that has to be looked at too. So it all depends. But in general, the study of negative emotions comes down to a study of the ego and to the psyche, to the feeling of I. And that's its main value relative to what we're talking about.
Well, I feel we can pause here, Peter, and we still have other questions we accumulated that are very good. And keep sending us question.
Yes, please.
Or topics of interest connected to fourth way, or I guess fourth way as it intersects with non-duality, because I find fourth way as in the non-dual teachings. Yeah, so feel free to send it to us, and may this help you diminish unnecessary suffering and get closer to God. It's a term we don't use so much in the fourth way, but I started to use it. I reclaim the word God was been washed down from the distortions and religious things and various things, and Gurdjieff will call it the absolute. And yeah, it's interesting, Gurdjieff. We are going to go into this another time, like the 5 strivings that Gurdjieff was recommending for people to how to live one's life. And one of them was to do this work, to become more conscious and transcend this low level of awareness. And in this way, we can be helpful to God, be helpful to Absolute, and alleviate the suffering of the Absolute. But we are going to go into this later, yeah? So this is like we're going to stop here.
Very good.
Peter.
Thank you, Mihai.